I think our government and every government has every day to earn the respect and the support of the people they serve.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Chris Farquhar, joined by Herald columnist Don Braid. Don, it's been another topsy-turvy week in Alberta politics. When you go through it all, we had the opposition Wild Rose calling for an RCMP investigation somehow into the so-called Premier's Den at the top of the Federal Building. We've had more revelations about severance payments being made out of the Premier's office. We're now up to $3 million in the last 3 years. Questions about who's winning the fundraising war between the parties. Clearly it's a neck and neck between the Tories and the Wild Rose. We've had questions about the Tories' trust fund and whether it's secret or not and what are the rules around that. We've had sort of the unprecedented attack from former Finance Minister Jim Dinning saying he's not going to run, but also then questioning the perks and the sort of the entitlement within the PC party and questions about the budget process. We've had more revelations about how much money is being spent on communications staff in this province. And then we've had former Premier Ed Stelmach finally weighing into the leadership crisis in his own party, saying he thinks they can put the party back together, but the next leader has to have humility and modesty. What do you make of all of these stories?
I think the PCs are so close to losing control of this whole narrative that this is only the beginning, because now you're going to get a period where a bunch of PCs are going to be arguing with each other about all the things that have gone wrong and what they're going to do right. I mean, that's what a leadership contest is all about. It's about people debating what they want to do and criticizing the past. And there's plenty of criticism of the past going around without having a bunch of PCs out there campaigning and doing it for them. And, you know, there's a role here for a new interim, actually technically real premier called Dave Hancock to do something about this and get a grip on it. But all he ever does when somebody like Dinning comes out with what he said, which is very powerful stuff, is defend the record. It almost looks like his job is to defend what Alison Redford did, and everybody else's job is going to be running is to attack what Alison Redford did. You have to spare a moment of empathy for Redford, who has paid the ultimate price in politics, having to resign so quickly and so unexpectedly, who continues to be pounded. Some of the stories are legitimate, but a lot of it is starting to look a bit like piling on to people. What do you think?
Well, it strikes me that they're still dealing with the residue of Redford's premiership. And I kind of wonder whether Dave Hancock is going to be able to sort of get rid of the baggage and move on and get this party ready for a new leader, because it looks like everywhere they turn, whether it's questions on entitlement or whether it's questions on the budget process, it seems like everything sort of leads back to what's happened in the last 3 years. And I wonder whether they can escape that within 6 months and then turn over the reins of this party to a new leader.
You know, I had somebody in the party suggested just today that what he should have done when Dinning came out with that powerful manifesto is he should have said, instead of saying, well, that's just a former treasurer defending his record, Hancock should have said, well, come on in and talk to us about it. We got to change. He is getting the government into a bad position, in my view, as the defender of the status quo. That seems to be his instinctive reaction to everything. So that is a very important role he's got there. And I said it before, but you know, you get people in the party who are already saying, we don't like the way Dave's handling this, right? So there we go.
Next week, we've got the legislature back in after a 2-week absence. We'll have a new premier in the House with Premier Hancock. I guess the question is going to be, will we ever see former Premier Redford back in that Alberta legislature again? You
know, for her to go back into that caucus with so many people criticizing her, most recently Jonathan Dennis and Thomas Okasik have been quite critical of her openly, to go back into caucus and with the kind of stuff that's going on in there, I'm not entirely sure she'd want to show up, and there's nothing forcing her to show up to be in caucus as a regular MLA. But then again, she might. Who knows? It'll be very interesting to see if she actually does. The appearances I'm as interested in next week are, what about Jim Prentice? Is Jim Prentice going to say, like, it is very much active, it's definitely alive, that he is considering this. There's no question about that, even though there's been not a word come out of his camp. That's why it's not coming out, because he is considering it. So if Jim Prentice comes into this thing, it could change the whole game overnight. You could see some of these caucus candidates dropping out. That could all happen very quickly. I don't think anybody's going to announce until after the budget debate is done and ministers no longer have to deal with that in the House. After the budget debate is done, then we'll start to see it, and it's kind of unpredictable when that'll happen, but it's coming soon.
Every week we talk about our winners and losers in Alberta politics. I'll start it off. I thought my winner of the week was Jim Dinning, the former finance minister, wrote an op-ed piece in both the Calgary Herald and the Edmonton Journal, and he basically declared, A, I'm not the guy for the job, but B, nobody inside that caucus or government is probably the right person for the job either. Launched sort of a stinging criticism on the budget process, which he says lacks clarity. It really seemed to me to be a bit of an attack on the current budget format from Doug Horner. And then he also talked about a culture of entitlement, and I thought that really sort of hit home for probably a lot of Conservatives and a lot of voters. I thought he was sort of the winner in the week, and because he obviously shaped the conversation. The loser of the week, conversely, is Doug Horner, I thought, because it seemed like a lot of the criticism was sort of aimed at him, the budget discussion, obviously, but even talking about the fact that the next leader shouldn't come from inside that caucus really seems like he would be the front runner, or one of the front runners from inside that caucus. I thought those comments were probably fairly damaging to his leadership hopes. What do you think?
Well, I agree with those, but I'd also add that I think the ex-premier Alison Redford was a big loser on the week, because she's out, she's gone, and yet the stories keep coming. The stories about the penthouse and all the rest keep coming out. So she's, in a way now, quite defenseless in a public sense. That she could always go public, I guess, but she doesn't have the resources of the Premier's office to help her defend herself. But I would say that, oddly enough, even though she articled for Jim Prentice, and everyone knows they're friends, that's not to say that Jim Prentice isn't friends with just about everybody in Alberta politics. He's also friends with Danielle Smith.
And Doug Horner.
And Doug Horner, right. So, but I think Prentice, we'd have to say Prentice, the position, now that he is actively considering this, the position that he's in regarding, if he wants it, the eagerness, let's say, on the part of the party to get him, the one candidate who might be able to open this up and move things forward, I'd have to say he's the winner on the week.